There we go. So once you set up your two standard deviations, the 86 is definitely outside of that. The 56 is too close to call. So if you want to call 56 an outlier, go for it. If you want to say 56 is okay, that's fine too. That's fine too. Cool? That's all question like 1 and 2 we're doing. And then question 3 said, is it okay to do that? This depends on whether or not you think the data is bell-shaped or not. And there's all kinds of ways you can decide that. I look at it and say, basically a bell. Basically a bell. Ish. You can run a skew coefficient on it if you want to, but just look at it. It looks like a bell to me. It definitely isn't a text message skew, correct? Definitely not. Okay, then I had you recalculate the modified box plot and then add that to the histogram. And notice we don't have to run this horrible calculation again to figure out where the cutoffs, where Cassie's cutoffs were for atypicality up here are. We just do this. Oh, look, Tabitha. Look, your mid-quartile and your medium have the same thing this time. Almost asymmetric, or almost perfectly symmetric. So there's 50%. Right there, Cassie. That's the car between too big and just big enough. And then down here, whoops, do that again. There. So you can see that the marker for too small with this method is a little bit lower. So 56 is more clearly in the range than it was for two standard deviation. There's not always perfect agreement. Look, they're not perfect. This one's a little bit wider than that one. And that's just the function of the definition of what an outlier is. That's just the function of the definition of what an outlier is.
Depending on the answer you want, you can choose.
You can basically, that is the truth of statistics, Athena. It's an unfortunate truth. What I would do is I report them both.
That's the lawyer.
But I've got, well, instead of the lawyer thinking, let's talk about the statistician's thinking. Tabitha, go ahead.
I would actually just...
You're just moving and stretching. Instead of the lawyer thinking, I want to have a closing thought. Why do we care about outliers? Why do we care about them? Why should we care about atypicality? Corey, what's your idea?
They skewed it.
Okay, I'm going to slide this over this way. I want to get a little laundry list going as we end class here. Number one, why do we care? Why do we care about outliers? Why do we care? Was this just an exercise? Was this just an exercise to make you guys run a bunch of numbers? No. Number one, Corey's got a very good point. What in particular do they skew? What measure in particular?
Average, right? Chases the tail.
Mm-hmm. X bar tends to chase outliers. And if you have outliers that are asymmetric to one side, the average is going to head towards them. Average 10 texts per person. That's ludicrous. That's absolutely ludicrous to say that people on average sent 10 texts. Because people on typical sent between 0 and 2. Good. Why else do we care about them? So that's kind of a way to care about them as to when we shouldn't use them or when we shouldn't use an average. Can you ever think of an example as to why an outlier would tell you something about a data set?
Patterns.
Say that again?
Patterns.
Go with that, Sarah. I love that.
Possibly an emerging pattern of outliers.
Love this. How many of you have ever taken ibuprofen for a headache or for muscle pain? Why do you take ibuprofen? Because it makes you feel better. How do you know it's going to make you feel better?
Because it's been proven to work.
How?
Statistically, it's been proven to work.
More, please.
Scientifically, I don't know.
Who in particular? Before they can call a drug ibuprofen and put it on store shelves,
They have to test it, yeah. They have to get a sample.
what they do, they got a pain scale. They do. You got a pain scale. You got a pain scale, okay? Here's pain. Pain. Higher. Lower. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to distill down an FDA study into 2.5 minutes here. But you'll get it, basically. They've got a bunch of folks that have comparable pain. And they give all those people a little tiny pill. Some of those little tiny pills have nothing in them. And some of those little tiny pills have ibuprofen. People that are getting the pill have no idea what they're getting. People that are giving the pill have no idea what the pill is. The person behind the two-way mirror making faces at them, they keep track. And here's what happens, and here's why ibuprofen exists. There is a distribution of pain in the control group, and there's a distribution of pain in the ibuprofen group.
Should have picked Advil.
I think
Yourself.
Say that again?
Should have picked Advil. It's easier
I should have picked Advil. Trade name, right? Here's the deal. When you look at the ibuprofen group, it's got its own curve. But if you're looking completely at the control group, these are the folks that got the pill with nothing in them, and then you look at one person in the ibuprofen group, just say they're right there, if you ignore that distribution, they're an outlier on that group, aren't they? They're an outlier on that group, which means they most likely belong in some other group. That is when you pay attention to outliers, because they might be showing you, as Sarah said, a pattern that might be emerging. Any drug that you take to take away pain, to increase circulation, whatever, those drugs have been clinically tested by the FDA using double-blind randomized controlled studies. And they have shown outlier results. And the outlier result shows that a cool, emerging, different pattern is happening. I noticed the exact same thing with my son. He started riding his bike, 46 months of age. No, excuse me, wrong. Is that right? Yeah, 46 months of age, right before he was 4. 46 months of age. I said, that's ridiculous, because I started riding a bike at like 5.5 years, 5.5 years. And then I started asking my friends back, he's like, when did you ride your bike? Cook, when did you ride your bike? I don't know, 5 or 6. All my friends rode our bikes at age like 5 and 6 and 5.5, and somewhere between 5 and 6 and around kindergarten, first grade. My son, preschool, riding his bike. So he was an outlier when compared to my friend data set from back east. But then I realized something. I started asking around my wife, well, how about Owen, Max's friend? Max is my son. Well, you know that, you've met him, kind of. When did Owen start riding his bike? Oh, it was like 2 months before Max. Oh, so 44 months. And I started noticing something. How about Hazel? Hazel's like 45. All of Max's friends out here started riding right about the same time Max did. And all of my friends and I on the East Coast started riding about the same time, essentially a year and a half later. We started figuring out that although Max and his friends weren't learning to ride the bikes together, they were basically learning with us, there was definitely a speed up in the process of how they were learning versus how I was learning. And I figured out what it was. Do you have any idea what it was?
Traffic.
Not traffic, because there wasn't that much traffic back in Delaware when I was learning how to ride a bike.
Time spent outside.
That could be. That's a good one, Athena. That's a good one. It could just be that me and Jen spend so much more time outside with Max. That's quite possible. Although my mom did the best she could. It's something more physical. Jessica?
Parents talking to each other about it?
Potentially. Again, I find it hard to measure, but yeah, potential. I'm not saying no. I think that's got something to do with it.
Is it because he was in such a high percentile, so maybe his body's learning easier, he figures?
He's unfortunately cursed with my coordination.
Okay, so that's not
Pretty low I got my appetite, my lack of coordination, and my hair. As you saw. Here's what I think it is. When you guys learn how to ride a bike, little tiny bike, what do we put on those bikes? Wheels. Training wheels. Guess what Max didn't have? Training wheels. None of his friends had training wheels. They had these things called scoot bikes. Little balance bikes, no pedals, but the kids run on them. So the 2 wheels, they're running, hold the handlebars, and as they get better, they start picking their feet up and gliding on this bike, thereby working on balance. Balance is something training wheels don't help you with. This is my theory. Justin, you could be right, I could be totally wrong, but my theory is all of Max's friends were using these scoot bikes, thereby getting free balance workouts. So then, when we decided to try him on a pedal bike, and I push him down the sidewalk and let him go, he's already got the balance, and then he starts pedaling, he's like, oh my God, there's go, and then he just goes. But then he just goes. So, Max and his friends, me and my friends, 2 different populations. Although Max is an outlier for my population, and I'm an outlier for his population. So outliers can be bad. They can show us that we measured something wrong. But they can also be pretty cool and show us something kind of in line pattern. That's what 244 is all about, by the way. That's all 244 is about how to measure those outliers. Totally freaking rad. But that's enough for
It has nothing to do with Ben.
It could be. I mean, I never saw a scoop butts when I moved here.
You're from Delaware.
Why do you say it like that? The hell, Shelby? You're from Delaware. All right, friends. I will not see you again until Monday, yes? Yes. So, I'm going to...